Sometimes the greatest shock in life is not finding someone you lost, but discovering what they carried away when they left. The departure board above Terminal B flickered with changing flight numbers as thousands of travelers moved through Chicago O'Hare International Airport on a cold November afternoon. Ethan Montgomery barely noticed any of it. The 43-year-old CEO had spent the morning finalizing a major acquisition and was already reviewing documents on his phone while walking toward a private lounge. His tailored charcoal coat, polished shoes, and security detail made him stand out, but his attention remained fixed on business. That was when he heard laughter. Not the loud, careless laughter of strangers. Something softer. Familiar. He glanced up instinctively. Two children were running a few feet ahead of a woman pulling a small suitcase through the crowded terminal. A little boy chased his twin sister around a row of seats while their mother tried unsuccessfully to slow them down. Ethan almost continued walking. Then the boy turned his head. Ethan stopped. The child had the same deep blue eyes staring back at him from the mirror every morning. The same eyes his own mother used to call unforgettable. For a moment, the noise of the airport seemed to disappear. His heart began pounding for reasons he could not explain. Then the little girl laughed and looked over her shoulder. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. She had the same eyes too. The same shape. The same expression. The same impossible familiarity. Confusion quickly turned into something else when the woman finally caught up to the twins and gently placed a hand on each child's shoulder. Ethan stared in disbelief. Naomi Carter. 5 years. 5 entire years since he had seen her face. 5 years since the arguments, the silence, the shattered marriage, and the painful day she disappeared from his life. Yet there she stood only 30 feet away, looking both different and exactly the same. Her hair was slightly shorter. Her posture carried a quiet confidence he did not remember, but her eyes remained unchanged. Calm, warm, unbreakable. Ethan felt frozen as memories flooded back. Without warning, he remembered the day she walked out of their penthouse apartment carrying only 2 suitcases. He remembered convincing himself she had betrayed his trust. He remembered choosing pride instead of conversation. And now she was standing before him with 2 children who appeared to share his eyes. The twins were about 5 years old. 5 years. The number echoed through his mind like a bell. Naomi knelt beside the children and adjusted the little girl's scarf. The twins smiled at her with complete trust. Complete love. The kind of connection that could not be manufactured. Ethan took a hesitant step forward. Then another. His throat tightened. He wanted to call her name, but suddenly he was afraid. Afraid of what he might learn. Afraid of what he already suspected. Just then the little boy looked directly at him. For a brief second their eyes met. The child smiled politely before turning back toward Naomi. The simple gesture struck Ethan harder than any business crisis he had ever faced. Because in that moment he realized something terrifying. Those children looked at him like a stranger. And for the first time in 5 years, Ethan Montgomery found himself desperately wanting answers that only Naomi Carter could give. 5 years can feel like a lifetime when silence becomes part of everyday life. Ethan remained standing in the middle of the terminal as travelers flowed around him like a river moving past a stone. Naomi had not noticed him yet. The twins were busy pointing excitedly toward a large airplane visible through the glass walls overlooking the runway. Their voices carried across the waiting area, light and cheerful, completely unaware that a stranger nearby was struggling to breathe through the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. Ethan could not take his eyes off them. Every detail seemed impossible to ignore. The boy's posture, the girl's smile, even the way they tilted their heads while listening to Naomi. Familiar pieces of himself appeared everywhere he looked. His mind searched desperately for another explanation, but none arrived. 5 years earlier, Naomi had disappeared after their marriage collapsed. No calls. No messages. No requests. No attempts to reconnect. At first, Ethan convinced himself that was what he wanted. Pride had a way of disguising loneliness. He buried himself in work, expanded Montgomery Technologies across 3 continents, appeared on magazine covers, and accumulated achievements that impressed everyone except the person staring back at him in the mirror. Success filled his calendar, but never the empty spaces left behind. Over time, memories of Naomi became quieter, though they never truly disappeared. Certain songs still reminded him of road trips they once took together. Certain restaurants still held reserved tables he never used. Certain mornings still began with an ache he refused to acknowledge. Now all those buried memories returned at once. Naomi reached into her handbag and handed each child a snack. The twins thanked her immediately. The simple exchange revealed something deeper than words. Trust, stability, love. Ethan felt an unexpected sense of admiration. Whatever life Naomi had built during the past 5 years, she had done it well. The children looked happy, healthy, secure. That realization should have comforted him. Instead, it intensified his regret. He had not witnessed their first words, their first birthdays, their first days of school. If they were his children, entire chapters of their lives existed without him. The thought felt unbearable. Then something happened that froze him completely. The little girl tugged gently on Naomi's sleeve. "Mom, can we call Grandpa after we land?" she asked. Naomi smiled warmly. "Of course, sweetheart." Ethan noticed the child's voice, her mannerisms, even the way she folded her hands while waiting for an answer. It reminded him of old family videos from his own childhood. The resemblance was almost impossible to ignore. Naomi finally looked up from her phone. Her eyes moved casually across the terminal before stopping on Ethan. Time seemed to stop. For several seconds, neither moved. Neither spoke. Shock flashed across Naomi's face before settling into something quieter. Composure. The twins followed her gaze and looked toward the tall stranger standing a short distance away. Ethan felt his pulse racing. 5 years of silence suddenly stood between them. 5 years of unanswered questions. 5 years of pain. The airport announcements faded into the background. The crowds disappeared. Nothing remained except a former husband, a former wife, and 2 children whose presence had just changed everything. Then Naomi slowly straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and met Ethan's eyes with a calm expression that told him one thing immediately. She had known this day might come, and unlike him, she was ready for it. The moment Naomi recognized Ethan, the years between them seemed to collapse into a single breath. Yet instead of surprise, there was a quiet steadiness in her eyes, as though she had already imagined this meeting many times before. The twins stood close to her, unaware that the stranger before them had once been the center of their mother's world. Ethan took another step forward. His voice felt unfamiliar when he finally spoke. Naomi. Hearing her name after 5 years stirred memories neither of them had invited back. Naomi offered a polite nod. "Hello, Ethan." No anger, no warmth, just calm. The simplicity unsettled him more than any confrontation could have. The twins looked between the 2 adults curiously. The little boy tugged lightly on Naomi's sleeve. "Mom, who is he?" Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without hesitation, but he suddenly could not find a single word. Naomi knelt beside the children. "This is someone I knew a long time ago." The answer was truthful, yet incomplete. Ethan noticed the careful choice of words. She was protecting them, protecting their peace. Before he could respond, an announcement echoed through the terminal, informing passengers that boarding would begin shortly for Naomi's flight. The twins immediately became excited, pointing toward the gate entrance. Ethan watched them laugh together and felt an unexpected ache. They moved naturally around Naomi. Every smile, every gesture, every small interaction revealed years of shared memories. Years he had never witnessed. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Naomi hesitated. The children were busy discussing which window seat offered the best view of the airplanes. For a brief moment, she studied Ethan's face. Time had changed him. The confidence remained, but there was something else now. Fatigue, regret, loneliness. Finally, she nodded. They moved a short distance away, while the twins remained seated nearby with coloring books and snacks. Ethan struggled to organize the questions racing through his mind. "Why did you disappear?" The words came out softer than he intended. Naomi looked toward the large windows overlooking the runway. "I did not disappear, Ethan. I left." Her answer carried no bitterness, only truth. Ethan lowered his gaze. 5 years earlier, he had convinced himself she abandoned their marriage without explanation. Standing here now, he realized how different those 2 words truly were. Disappearing suggested guilt. Leaving suggested pain. Naomi continued watching the planes. There was nothing left to fight for back then. Every conversation ended the same way. Every attempt to explain myself was dismissed before I finished speaking. Ethan remembered those months. The accusations, the misunderstandings, the stubborn pride that had turned every disagreement into a wall. At the time, he believed he was protecting himself. Looking back, he saw something very different. He saw a man who stopped listening. A gust of cold air swept through the terminal as passengers entered from outside. The twins laughed at something only children could find hilarious. Their happiness seemed to illuminate the space around them. Ethan glanced toward them again. Are they? He could not finish the sentence. Naomi followed his gaze. For several seconds, she remained silent. Then she looked directly at him. You already know the answer. The words struck him harder than he expected. Ethan felt emotion rising in his chest. 5 years. 5 years of birthdays, bedtime stories, school projects, scraped knees, holiday mornings, and first experiences. 5 years that could never be recovered. Another boarding announcement sounded overhead. Naomi gathered the twins and reached for their luggage. The children stood immediately beside her. Ethan wanted to stop her, wanted answers, wanted time. But time was the one thing neither of them could reclaim. As Naomi prepared to walk toward the gate, Ethan realized this unexpected reunion was not the end of a mystery. It was only the beginning of a truth far larger than he was prepared to face. After Naomi and the twins disappeared beyond the boarding gate, Ethan remained motionless in the terminal long after their flight had departed. The questions followed him all the way back to New York. They followed him into meetings, into elevators, into quiet moments between conference calls. But while Ethan struggled with the shock of discovery, Naomi continued living the life she had built one day at a time. 5 years earlier, she had left with little more than determination and faith. The months that followed were some of the hardest of her life. She moved into a modest apartment outside Milwaukee, far from the memories that seemed to wait around every corner. When Noah and Nina were born, she held them in her arms and realized that everything had changed. Fear still existed. Uncertainty still existed. But so did purpose. Every morning began before sunrise. Naomi balanced work, childcare, and endless responsibilities without complaint. She accepted temporary jobs. She worked late hours. She learned how to stretch every dollar. Some nights, she fell asleep at the kitchen table after paying bills while the twins slept peacefully in the next room. Yet even during difficult seasons, she never allowed bitterness to become part of their home. Family photographs still decorated the walls. Music still played while breakfast cooked on weekend mornings. Laughter remained welcome. As the twins grew older, they filled every corner of her life with energy and wonder. Noah loved asking questions about everything. Airplanes, dinosaurs, weather patterns. If something existed, he wanted to understand it. Nina possessed a quieter curiosity. She loved books, drawing, and observing details others overlooked. Together, they transformed ordinary moments into adventures. Grocery shopping became treasure hunts. Rainy afternoons became blanket forts. Simple walks became opportunities to discover something new about the world. Occasionally, the twins asked about their father. The questions always arrived unexpectedly. During a school project, before bedtime, while watching other families together at community events. Naomi never spoke negatively about Ethan. She refused to turn her pain into their burden. Instead, she answered honestly without sharing wounds they were too young to understand. She told them their father was intelligent, hardworking, ambitious. She told them people sometimes made mistakes they wished they could take back. Most importantly, she never allowed them to believe they were unwanted. Years passed. Slowly, life became more stable. Naomi earned a leadership position with a nonprofit organization supporting families and children. The work gave her purpose beyond survival. She discovered that helping others heal often strengthened her own heart. By the time Noah and Nina turned 5, their small apartment had become a warm home filled with photographs, artwork, and memories created together. There was no luxury, no private jets, no penthouse overlooking a skyline. But there was peace. One evening, after helping the twins complete a school project, Naomi found herself sitting alone at the kitchen table while they slept. Moonlight filtered through the window. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. She opened an old storage box and removed a photograph from years ago. The picture showed a younger version of herself standing beside Ethan during happier times. For a moment, she studied the image. Not with anger, not with longing, simply with acceptance. Then she carefully returned it to the box, and closed the lid. The past would always exist. It helped shape the woman she had become, but it no longer controlled her future. What Naomi did not know was that thousands of miles away, Ethan was beginning to revisit the same memories. And for the first time in 5 years, both of them were moving toward a truth that neither could avoid forever. The weeks following the airport encounter changed Ethan in ways no board meeting or financial crisis ever had. He found himself distracted by details that once seemed insignificant. Dates, timelines, old photographs, memories he had spent years avoiding now returned with relentless clarity. One evening, long after most employees had left Montgomery Technologies headquarters, Ethan sat alone in his office overlooking Manhattan. Rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows while the city glowed beneath a blanket of lights. Spread across his desk were documents he had requested from storage archives, personal calendars from 5 years earlier, and photographs from the final months of his marriage. At first, he told himself he was simply searching for answers. But deep down, he already knew what he would find. His eyes stopped on a photograph taken just weeks before Naomi left. They were attending a charity event together. Naomi stood beside him wearing a dark blue dress, one hand resting lightly against her stomach. Ethan stared at the image. Back then, he had barely noticed the gesture. Now he could not stop looking at it. Another memory surfaced. Naomi canceling a business trip because she was not feeling well. Naomi appearing unusually tired. Naomi trying repeatedly to tell him something important. He remembered dismissing those conversations because he was consumed by a major acquisition. The realization left him unsettled. Across Wisconsin, life continued peacefully for Naomi and the twins. Noah and Nina were preparing for a school science fair. Their dining table had become a workshop filled with markers, construction paper, and half-finished projects. Naomi watched them laugh together while helping organize supplies. The simple scene filled her with gratitude. She had built this life through patience and sacrifice. Yet ever since Chicago, a quiet tension lingered in the back of her mind. She knew Ethan would not simply forget what he had seen. Eventually, questions would lead him toward the truth. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan drove to a storage facility where several boxes containing personal belongings from his former marriage remained untouched. Dust covered many of them. Years had passed since he last opened any of it. Inside one box, he discovered old journals, greeting cards, and unopened envelopes. Most contained ordinary memories. Then he found a medical appointment reminder dated only days before Naomi left. The document listed a specialist consultation that he never attended. Ethan's heart began racing. He searched through additional papers until another document slipped from between the pages of a notebook. It was a sonogram image. The date matched the final weeks of their marriage. Ethan stared at the picture in disbelief. His hands trembled slightly. There, printed clearly beneath the image, was a notation he could not ignore. Twin pregnancy. The room seemed to spin around him. For several minutes he simply sat there, unable to move. Every assumption he had carried for 5 years began collapsing under the weight of a single piece of evidence. Naomi had been expecting children before she left. Their children. Suddenly dozens of forgotten moments took on entirely different meanings. Conversations he never listened to. Questions he never asked. Signs he never noticed. The truth had been standing in front of him all along, hidden behind his own pride. Outside, evening sunlight faded beyond the storage facility windows. Ethan lowered his head and closed his eyes. For the first time, he was no longer wondering whether Noah and Nina were his children. The real question now was far more painful. How much of their lives had he lost because he failed to see what mattered when he still had the chance? The discovery changed everything. For days, Ethan carried the sonogram image with him wherever he went. It remained folded inside a leather portfolio that accompanied him from meetings to flights and back again. Each time he looked at it, the same realization returned. Naomi had never hidden the truth from him. He had simply been too distracted, too stubborn, and too convinced of his own assumptions to see it. The mistake no longer belonged to the past. It lived beside him now. One quiet evening, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse overlooking Central Park. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls, but for once he paid no attention to the skyline he had spent years admiring. Instead, he opened another box recovered from storage. Inside were notebooks, holiday cards, and several unopened. letters addressed in Naomi's handwriting. He stared at them for a long moment before carefully opening the first envelope. The letter had been written only weeks after she left. Naomi's words were calm, respectful. She explained that she was leaving because every attempt to rebuild trust had failed. She wrote that she hoped one day he would find peace. She never demanded anything, never blamed him. Near the bottom of the page, one sentence stopped him cold. "There are things I wanted to tell you before I left, but I realized you stopped listening long before I stopped speaking." Ethan lowered the letter slowly. The room felt unusually quiet. He opened a second envelope, then a third. Each letter revealed pieces of a story he never allowed himself to hear. Naomi had written during the pregnancy. She had written after the twins were born. She had even mailed photographs during the first year. The letters had been sent to an assistant who managed personal correspondence while Ethan traveled constantly. Somehow they had never reached him. Lost among schedules, business trips, and corporate priorities, entire chapters of his life had remained unread. Ethan spread the photographs across the table. His breath caught. There was Noah wrapped in a blue blanket shortly after birth. Nina sleeping peacefully beside her brother. Tiny hands, tiny smiles, moments preserved forever in glossy prints. One photograph showed Naomi sitting in a rocking chair holding both babies. She looked exhausted, yet there was a light in her eyes he had not seen in years. A light created by love. Ethan studied every image as though trying to recover time itself. Across Wisconsin, autumn leaves covered neighborhood sidewalks in shades of gold and red. Naomi walked home with Noah and Nina after school. The twins carried backpacks nearly as large as they were and spent most of the walk talking excitedly about upcoming school activities. Life remained simple, predictable, peaceful. Yet Naomi sensed change approaching. Since the airport encounter, she occasionally caught herself wondering what Ethan had discovered, whether he finally understood, whether he regretted the choices that separated them. She never spoke about those thoughts aloud. Some questions belonged to time. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Naomi received an email. The sender's name immediately made her heart pause. Ethan Montgomery. She stared at the screen for several minutes before opening the message. It was surprisingly short. No excuses, no demands, no attempt to rewrite history. Only a few honest sentences. He thanked her for raising two remarkable children. He apologized for the years he could never return. And at the very end, he wrote something she never expected to read. "I finally understand how much I missed. And I finally understand that the person I failed most was not you. It was myself." Naomi closed the laptop and sat quietly beside the window. Outside, the wind carried leaves across the empty street. Somewhere far away, a man was beginning to face the truth. And for the first time in 5 years, that truth was no longer hidden. The reply Naomi eventually sent was brief. She thanked Ethan for his honesty and wished him well. Nothing more. No invitation. No promises. No reopening of old doors. Yet for Ethan, those few sentences meant more than any business victory he had achieved in years. They represented something he had not expected to receive. A chance to begin earning trust instead of demanding it. The following months unfolded differently than either of them imagined. Ethan stopped measuring progress in quarterly reports and stock performance. Instead, he learned to value patience. He never appeared unexpectedly at Naomi's home. He never pressured her for meetings. He respected every boundary she established. Occasionally, they exchanged emails about the twins, school activities, academic achievements, small milestones. At first, the conversations remained formal, careful, limited, but they existed. That alone felt significant. One snowy Saturday morning, Naomi received a package addressed to Noah and Nina. Inside were 2 science kits accompanied by a handwritten note. The message did not identify Ethan as their father. It simply wished them success in their upcoming school projects. Naomi read the note twice before placing it beside the twins. Breakfast plates. The children were thrilled. They spent the entire weekend building small experiments and documenting their results. Watching them laugh together, Naomi found herself unexpectedly emotional. Not because of the gift itself. Because for the first time, Ethan's actions seemed motivated by care rather than regret. Across New York, Ethan continued discovering pieces of the life he had missed. Naomi occasionally shared photographs from school events. Noah receiving a reading award. Nina displaying one of her drawings at a community art exhibit. Each image felt precious. Each image reminded him of years that could never be recovered. Yet instead of drowning in guilt, he began focusing on what remained possible. One afternoon, Naomi agreed to a video call. The twins sat at the kitchen table while Ethan appeared on a laptop screen from his office. Noah immediately launched into a detailed explanation of a model rocket he was building. Nina proudly displayed sketches from her art notebook. Ethan listened carefully, asked questions, smiled often. The conversation lasted only 20 minutes, but after it ended, he remained staring at the blank screen for a long time. Their voices lingered in his mind. Their laughter echoed through the quiet office. For the first time, the twins no longer felt like strangers. Weeks later, Naomi attended a regional nonprofit conference in Chicago. By coincidence, Ethan was scheduled to speak at a nearby leadership event. After several conversations, they agreed to meet for coffee while the twins participated in a supervised children's program. The meeting felt strangely familiar and entirely new at the same time. Years had changed them both. They spoke about work, about family, about lessons learned through hardship. There were moments of sadness, moments of reflection, yet there was also peace. Neither person attempted to rewrite history. Neither denied the pain that had occurred. They simply acknowledged it and continued talking. As afternoon sunlight filtered through the cafe windows, Ethan noticed something remarkable. Naomi smiled more easily now than she had during the final years of their marriage. Strength had replaced uncertainty. Confidence had replaced fear. He admired the woman she had become. When they finally stood to leave, neither rushed toward conclusions. Healing rarely followed a straight path. But as they walked outside into the crisp Chicago air, both understood the same truth. The story that ended 5 years earlier was not returning. Something entirely different was beginning. And this time, it would be built on honesty rather than assumptions. Spring arrived gradually, bringing longer days and warmer sunlight to both New York and Wisconsin. By then, what had once been occasional conversations had evolved into something more meaningful. Ethan was no longer a distant figure appearing only through emails or scheduled video calls. He had become a consistent presence in Noah and Nina's lives. Not perfect, not entitled, simply present. Every Wednesday evening, he joined their virtual homework sessions. Every Saturday morning, he called to hear about soccer practice, art projects, and whatever new questions Noah had discovered that week. The twins began sharing pieces of their lives naturally. They no longer viewed him as a stranger. They viewed him as someone learning alongside them. One weekend, Naomi agreed to let Ethan visit Wisconsin. The twins had been looking forward to it for weeks. Noah created a detailed schedule of activities. Nina drew a colorful welcome sign and taped it beside the front door. When Ethan arrived, he felt nervous in a way he had never experienced before. Not during investor presentations. Not during major negotiations. Only now. Because this mattered. The afternoon unfolded with surprising simplicity. They visited a local park, fed ducks near a small lake, shared sandwiches beneath a pavilion while spring flowers bloomed nearby. Noah proudly demonstrated how fast he could run across the soccer field. Nina showed Ethan a sketchbook filled with drawings she had created throughout the year. Every page revealed pieces of a childhood he had missed. Yet instead of focusing on regret, Ethan concentrated on listening, learning, appreciating the moments still available to him. Later that evening, after the twins fell asleep, Ethan and Naomi sat on the back porch overlooking a quiet neighborhood street. The sky glowed orange and gold as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. For a while, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. "They are incredible children," Ethan finally said. Naomi smiled softly. "They are." He looked toward the house where Noah and Nina slept peacefully. "You did that." Naomi shook her head gently. "We all become who we are because of many people. Teachers, friends, family, experiences." Ethan understood what she was doing. She was offering grace without erasing responsibility. It was one of the qualities he had always admired most about her. The following months brought more visits, more conversations, more shared experiences. Slowly, a new rhythm formed. One built not on old expectations, but on mutual respect. Then, during a community family festival organized by Naomi's nonprofit organization, something unexpected happened. Hundreds of families gathered in a large outdoor park filled with music, games, and activities. Volunteers moved between booths while children laughed beneath colorful banners. Noah and Nina spent most of the afternoon participating in contests and collecting prizes. Ethan volunteered wherever help was needed, carrying supplies, setting up tables, serving refreshments. No one treated him like a famous executive. For once, he was grateful. As evening approached, families gathered near the main stage for closing remarks. Naomi stood before the crowd and thanked everyone for supporting the event. Applause echoed across the park. Then Noah suddenly took Nina's hand and ran toward the stage. Before either adult could stop them, the twins reached the microphone. Noah looked at the crowd confidently. Nina smiled beside him. "We want to thank our mom," Noah said. The audience applauded warmly. Then Nina added something neither Naomi nor Ethan expected. "And we want to thank our dad for coming back." The park fell quiet for a moment. Ethan felt emotion rise instantly. Naomi looked toward the twins, then toward Ethan. In the fading golden light of sunset, surrounded by families and laughter, everyone seemed to understand the same thing. Some reunions do not erase the past. They simply create enough hope to build a future. Summer arrived with bright skies and long afternoons that seemed to stretch forever. Nearly a year had passed since the unexpected meeting at the airport. In that time, life had changed in ways none of them could have predicted. Not through grand gestures or dramatic promises, but through hundreds of small decisions repeated consistently. Ethan kept showing up. School events, weekend visits, birthday celebrations, parent meetings. The things he once overlooked had become the moments he valued most. One Saturday morning, the Montgomery family name appeared on a sponsor banner at a large community center opening funded jointly by Ethan's company and Naomi's nonprofit organization. Families from across the region attended the celebration. Children raced between activity stations while volunteers welcomed guests through newly opened doors. The center represented something both Ethan and Naomi believed in, a place where families could find support, education, and hope. Noah and Nina proudly guided visitors through the building as unofficial ambassadors. They treated every guest like a personal friend. Watching them move through the crowd filled Naomi with quiet pride. Nearby, Ethan listened as the twins enthusiastically explained their favorite rooms and future plans. There were moments when he still felt regret. Regret for the years he missed. Regret for the memories he could never reclaim. But those feelings no longer controlled him. The past had become a lesson rather than a prison. Later that afternoon, a small ceremony took place in the center's courtyard. Local leaders thanked donors and volunteers. Families shared stories about how community support had changed their lives. As the event concluded, Noah raised his hand unexpectedly. The audience laughed as a microphone was brought over to him. "I want to say something," he announced confidently. Nina immediately stepped beside her brother. The crowd grew quiet. Noah looked toward Naomi first. "Mom taught us that strong people keep going even when life is hard." Then he turned toward Ethan. "And Dad taught us that people can change when they choose to do better." The courtyard fell silent. Several people wiped tears from their eyes. Ethan felt emotion rise in his chest. Naomi looked at the twins and smiled. It was the kind of smile that only comes from years of sacrifice finally bearing fruit. As evening approached, families gradually returned home. The golden light of sunset settled across the courtyard, painting everything in warm shades of amber and gold. Ethan and Naomi stood together watching Noah and Nina play near a fountain. Neither spoke for a while. There was no need. Some moments were complete exactly as they were. Finally, Ethan glanced toward Naomi. "Thank you," he said quietly. She looked at him with calm understanding. "For what?" Ethan watched the twins laughing together beneath the fading sunlight. "For never teaching them to hate me." Naomi followed his gaze. "They deserved better than that." Ethan nodded slowly. Those simple words captured everything he had learned. Love was not proven through wealth, status, or success. It was proven through presence, through patience, through choosing compassion when resentment would have been easier. The sun continued sinking toward the horizon as Noah and Nina ran back toward their parents. One child grabbed Naomi's hand. The other grabbed Ethan's. Together, they started walking toward the parking lot. For figures moving beneath a sky filled with golden light. They were not returning to the life that existed before. That life belonged to another chapter. Instead, they were creating something new. Something stronger because it had survived mistakes. Something wiser because it had endured loss. As they disappeared into the warmth of the summer evening, Ethan realized the greatest gift life had given him was not a second chance at the past. It was the opportunity to become worthy of the future standing beside him.